the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency, Ambassador Yusuf Maitama-Tuga, OON, our host, the Resident Representative of UNDP Nigeria, Her Excellency, Ms. Elsie Atafwa, the Senate Committee Chairman of Foreign Affairs, Senator Abubakar Sani Bello, Honorable Chairman, House of Representatives Committee on Foreign Affairs, Honorable Oluwole Oke. His honorable colleagues that have joined him today, Honorable Marjorie Salisu and Honorable Fuad Laguda. Her Excellency Ambassador Janet Olisa, Director Regions, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. His Excellency Ambassador Emmanuel Olawale Awe, Director ECOWAS Unit, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of missions and international organizations here present, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen here present. My name is Temitope Atiba. I am your moderator for today. I'm a special assistant in the office of the Honorable Minister. You're welcome to the Regional Partnership for Democracy Stakeholder Engagement. And as we proceed with today's agenda, we will begin by taking the national anthem. May we rise up for the national anthem. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. You may please have your seat. Thank you very much. First on the order of proceedings today, we'll be taking the opening remarks from our host, the UNDP Nigeria Resident Representative, Mrs. Elsie Atafwa. Ms. Elsie Atafwa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Your Excellency, Ambassador Yusuf Maitama-Tuga, OON, Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Senator Abubakar Sani Bello, Chairman, Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs, National Assembly, Honorable Oluwole Oke, Chairman, House Committee on Foreign Affairs, National Assembly, Honorable Laguda Fuad Kayode, Member, House Committee, National Assembly, Honorable Majigiri Salisu, Member, House Committee, National Assembly, Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners of ECOWAS Member States, West Africa, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning again. It is both a privilege and an honor to welcome you to the United Nations House, a house that has been given to us generously by the government of Nigeria. And we want to say thank you, Honorable Minister, whilst you're here. And really thank you for coming for the inaugural stakeholder engagement of the Regional Partnership for Democracy program. And again, warm greetings. I'm also acting as the United Nations Resident Coordinator in the absence of Muhammad Fall. So let me bring you greetings from the entire UN family. Your presence today reflects our shared commitment to democratic renewal in West Africa, anchored in African values, our common history, our vision of a peaceful, inclusive, and resilient region. Let me begin by acknowledging our Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Ambassador Yusuf Maitama-Tuga. Your leadership in championing this initiative under the direction of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu reflects Nigeria's continued commitment to regional peace and governance. I also thank the distinguished members of the Senate and House Committees on Foreign Affairs for your invaluable role in reinforcing democratic governance at national and regional levels. And to the group of esteemed ambassadors and high commissioners from West African member states, your engagement in this process is crucial. You represent not just your countries, but the democratic aspirations of over 400 million West Africans. Excellencies, this program is a legacy-defining initiative of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Chair of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government. It is proudly Nigerian-led but regionally focused effort to strengthen democracy, deepen civic education, and ensure resilient, inclusive governance systems. We commend His Excellency the President for the bold and visionary leadership and equally applaud the Honorable Minister for translating that vision into reality through strategic collaboration with the United Nations Development Program. UNDP is honored to co-develop and implement this program in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is a model of national and international cooperation driven by mutual respect, shared vision, and a commitment to a regional transformation from within. So let me just briefly say a few things in terms of the pillars of the program. Anchored on 3 pillars. The first of all is on institutional and enhancing the integrity and capacity of electoral commissions, parliaments, and judicial systems. Secondly, is a focus on citizen engagement, ensuring inclusive democratic participation by women, by youth, civil society, and marginalized groups. And finally, knowledge exchange, promoting platforms for peer learning and scaling successful governance models across West Africa. As UNDP, we bring strong value proposition in this initiative, a presence in all the West African countries, a deep expertise in governance, institution building, and civic education and engagement, and a robust global network to enable South-to-South learning and cooperation. We are fully committed to supporting member states through this journey. Today's session is more than a consultation, Excellencies. It is a call to action, a moment to consolidate political will, strengthen regional ownership, and align our collective efforts with the Africa Charter on Democracy and other governance protocols in the continent. Your insights and leadership will be crucial as we move from planning to implementation. So in closing, Your Excellency, Honorable Foreign Minister, and Excellencies who are here, I express sincere appreciation to our Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs and the government of Nigeria for their trust in UNDP. To all member states present today, thank you for your engagement. We look forward to deepening this partnership as we collectively shape the democratic future of West Africa. Let today's dialogue mark a new beginning, a bold step forward in advancing Africa's solutions to Africa's governance challenges. Once again, thank you very much. And Honorable Minister, what a pleasure once again to welcome you to UN House. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. May we now have the opening address by His Excellency, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Maitama-Tuga, please.
The Chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, Honorable Oluwole Oke, House of Representatives, members here present, sorry, Labuda Kayode, Salisu Majidi, the resident representative of the UNDP, LC Asafua, heads of mission here present, representatives of international organizations, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. It is a profound honor to welcome you all today to what we consider a defining moment for the democratic future of our region. Permit me to begin by expressing Nigeria's deepest appreciation for your presence and reaffirming our resolute belief in the power of African solutions to African challenges. To further underscore the importance of this strategic legacy-defining initiative, we're joined today by distinguished and honorable members of the Nigerian National Assembly, ably represented by the chairman and members of the committees, who have shelved other essential affairs of state to be here with us today. The Regional Partnership for Democracy, or RPD, is not merely a policy framework. It is a bold assertion that democracy in West Africa must be sustained, strengthened, and most importantly, shaped by us. This partnership is our collective response to the sobering realities that confront our democracies: eroding public trust, fragile institutions, civic disengagement, and in some quarters, a resurgence of unconstitutional rule. Yet, even in the face of these trials, we do not despair. Instead, we resolve to act together, to act deliberately, and to act with the firm conviction that democracy in its most authentic form must reflect our values, our cultures, and our aspirations as Africans. Excellencies, Nigeria recognizes the need for continued solidarity among the countries of the West African sub-region, and indeed, Africa as a whole. We're aware of the impact of exogenous circumstances on some of our neighbors, where, for instance, the 2015 to 2020 EU Sahel strategy was unfortunately a failure, and the broader consequences of failing to address insecurity across the Sahel are evident. It is also important to note the weaponization of migration through laws that criminalize all ancillary activities in the migration economy. Notable among these was what was referred to as Law 2015-36 that was implemented in Niger Republic. When one analyzes the events of the recent past, it is as though Jean Raspail, as he said in his 1973 book, The Camp of the Saints, and it's as though that has found a form of renaissance in the recent migration fear-mongering going on in certain parts of the world. Raspail wrote, and I quote, "Your universe has no meaning to them. They will not try to understand. They will be tired. They will be cold. They will make fire with your beautiful oak doors." This is in reference to migrants. The notion that migration from the global south will obliterate the culture of the global north must be tempered by the understanding that when managed effectively, migration fosters a scenario where cultures complement one another. Additionally, contributory endogenous factors that have placed democracy in the region under pressure cannot be overlooked. Some of these factors include the failure to address poor governance at the local level and the lack of effective representation, particularly at the grassroots level. This is why it is crucial that we think long term. We must begin now to systematically integrate the objectives of initiatives such as the RPD into our governance structures and regional conversations. Only through consistency, political will, and regional ownership can we truly establish a culture of democracy that is resilient and inclusive. RPD is designed as a flexible, regionally owned platform. It is not a one size fits all prescription, but rather a cooperative space for member states to define their reform paths anchored in shared norms. It complements and strengthens our commitments under the African Union Charter on Democracy, aiming to support each country as it works at its own pace. It is our vision that through the RPD, we will support electoral systems that reflect the will of our people, empower civic actors to participate fully and responsibly, and reinforce the accountability of the executive, legislature, judiciary, and oversight institutions. But more than that, we envision a partnership that thrives on peer learning, where our countries become each other's teachers and students, drawing from lived experiences and shaping a governance model that is homegrown, dynamic, and resilient. We must also recognize and deeply appreciate the valuable partnership of the United Nations Development Programme. UNDP has stood firmly beside us in co-creating and driving this initiative, offering not just technical expertise and strategic vision, but a shared belief in the potential of democratic renewal led by Africans for Africans. Their support from conceptualization through to the implementation framework has been vital, and we look forward to continuing this strong collaboration in the months and years ahead. Let me be clear, we're not here to lecture, nor are we here to impose. We're here to invite each of you to co-create this vision of democratic renewal, to lead, to adapt, and to build with us. Today, I respectfully urge you to consider 5 key actions. Endorse the RPD as a regionally owned instrument for democratic reform. Integrate RPD principles into your national governance agendas, ensuring local ownership and impact. Align this effort with the AU Charter on Democracy, creating coherence in our collective obligations. Serve as anchor states, piloting RPD innovations and offering leadership in peer learning. And adopt a joint communique that speaks with one voice to our people, partners, and global counterparts. Colleagues and friends, let this be the moment we recommit to the democratic dream, not as an imported idea, but as an African legacy that values voice, dignity, equity, and accountability. Together, let us build a democratic future worthy of our people and inspiring to the world. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. May we now move to the remarks by the chairman. May we now move to the remarks by the chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Foreign Affairs, Honorable Olowale. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. MC. Our host, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, my dear fellow colleagues, we bring warm greetings from the Speaker and the entire leadership of the House. We are pleased to be your guest at this historical event. Before proceeding further, I would like to thank the leadership of the United Nations Development Program, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and other critical stakeholders for putting together this briefing session, and with specific focus this time on West African member states. We are witnessing a period of significant global uncertainties. On the geopolitical side, socio-economic side, peace and security and governance. One lesson learned from the 20th century is that the world is better when we bond together and cooperate. This is a proven strategy. A common African proverb equivalent to united we stand, divided we fall. Is unity is strength, or togetherness is powerful. We must replicate it using platforms like the RPD. I recall that more than 2 decades ago, there were lots of efforts across Africa on peer-to-peer review. We heard of frameworks like the New Partnership for African Development, NIPAD, now Abuja, and others. However, it has long gone quiet. RPD is therefore timely, and we must together ensure that it does not lose steam and does not fall through the cracks. Once again, I warmly welcome you and wish you fruitful deliberations. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you successful deliberations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman, for your speech. As we proceed with the agenda, we're at the point where we review the initiative. To help us along with this review today, we have with us the RPD Program Advisor and former UNDP Resident Representative in Chad, South Sudan, and Country Director, Ghana and Liberia, Professor Kamil Kamaluddin. We also have with us the Senior Special Assistant to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria on International Cooperation, Mr. Dapo Oyewole. They will lead us through the presentation. Gentlemen, I invite them to take the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, and good morning. Ambassador Yusuf Maitama Tuga, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Honorable Oluwole House Committee Chair on Foreign Affairs, Honorable Fuad Laguda, and I must say all the members of the House of Representatives here represented, and of course our host, Madam Elsie Atafwa, the resident representative of the United Nations Development Program, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, heads of mission, senior management and staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as the United Nations, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be able to share some reflections and some thoughts that help to articulate why we are here today. And I think it goes without saying that, and before I proceed, I think there's a PowerPoint presentation that should guide our discussion. Okay, I think that's on now. Right, so like I was saying, it's important to know why we are here. And I think the Honorable Minister, Madam Atafwa, and Honorable Oke have adequately and very aptly framed the tone and the scope for our discussion. I think it is no secret, ladies and gentlemen, that in Africa, in West Africa, and even globally, there are growing questions about the ability, the capacity of democracy in its current constructs and how it delivers on the dividends of development. Some of the challenges we see, not just in our region, but globally, reflect this restlessness and this questioning of what is democracy, what should it look like, and how should it function, and in fact, and for who, and how. As we mentioned earlier on, the world is in a state of flux, and the students of historical institutionalism will focus on the notion of critical junctures in history that define the direction of path dependence and what happens next. And through history, ladies and gentlemen, we've had many of these opportunities. We first, of course, had the end of colonization and the beginning of our own independence. We saw the end of the Second World War and the Cold War. And even recently, COVID gave us cause to rethink our place and our position as Africans and who we should rely on to be in charge of shaping our destiny as a people, but also how we govern ourselves. So one of the critical reasons why we are here is that we are also now at another critical juncture where the global political architecture is being reshaped, reconstructed, and redesigned. The question is, will Africa now stand on the sidelines, or we will take charge in shaping the future, not just of our region, but also the future of how we practice a democracy that is fit for us, fit for our aspirations, and fit for what our people want to see and want to hear in terms of the future. Next slide, please. So, much has been said about what is the Regional Partnership for Democracy. In essence, it is a response to these challenges, but not just the challenges, but also trying to identify the opportunities and how this time we're not bystanders, we're not listeners, we're not students. We are fully in charge of shaping what happens in terms of Africa, our democracy, our development, and the inclusive approach that we now take to governance, which brings in ensuring the role of government, civil society, media, and the involvement of our friends in the international development community, as well as diplomatic actors. At the core of our RPD is the importance of promoting a Pan-African democratic philosophy. A democracy that reflects our history, reflects our culture, and reflects our aspirations and also our experiences, because we have been learning about democracy. Many countries have been teaching us about democracy, but often it is not stated that democracy has actually always been part of African cultural traditions of governance. Secondly, effective governance. Many people say there's a difference between democracy and governance. Democracy, on one hand, is how you choose your leaders and how you make decisions. Governance is how you show results and impact. And I think across the continent, there's no big debate about whether democracy should be inclusive. The main debate is it really delivering on the dividends in terms of effective governance? So RPD wants to help to strengthen our thinking, deepen our conversation, and strengthen our partnerships in ensuring more effective governance. We're also in a state, particularly in this age of social media, where all kinds of information is floating back and forth. And particularly for the younger generation that did not have the benefit that we, the older ones, had to sit at the feet of our mothers and our fathers and our grandparents to learn the proverbs, one which, of course, Honorable Oke mentioned, and also the ethics of our customs. But at the core of it also is democratic values. Africa, our continent, and our people have always been a society based on values. How do we ensure that these democratic values now pervade the length and the breadth of not just the West African sub-region, but Africa in total? Fourth, how do we foster democratic governance and regional cooperation in West Africa? as we see what's happening globally today, it is very, very clear to us that one of our greatest strengths as a continent, what some people will call a demographic bulge, in fact, is a strength. And what makes it a strength for us is how well we're able to coordinate, harness the energy, the vitality, and the numbers of the people that we have. And the way in which we do that is through enhancing regional cooperation. We are mindful that within our region, there's a lot of diversity. In fact, even our language sometimes can divide us. But one thing about the African culture is wherever you go, there's some fundamentals that bring us together. And one of them is hospitality, respect, and cooperation. How do we build that into how we function as governments and how we cooperate as governments? The fifth, I think I've already mentioned, which is really the so what question. Academics will say, you want to write a thesis, you want, so what? The many young people today, some who are out of school, and those who are graduating and do not get jobs, are asking, so what? What does democracy have to offer us? And how can we ensure that it gives us an opportunity to fulfill our potential as individuals, but also to fulfill our potential as a generation? They are asking, if we have democracy, so what? Young people and Africans across the board want to see the dividends of democracy in terms of peace, stability, and development. RPD wants to facilitate a process through which collaboratively we can work together to engineer that. Why is it an urgent necessity? Well, it is no surprise that we are facing democratic backsliding in some parts. And this presentation says in West Africa. But I think those of us around the room, we know it's not just in West Africa. It's even in other regions that have been teaching us about democracy itself, which shows you that across the world, everybody is unpacking and rethinking democracy. Why should Africa and West Africa not rethink democracy as well in a way that works for us and ensures that we're still upholding the values and the standards of our roles and our responsibility in the Committee of Nations? But for this to happen, there's a clear necessity for strategic leadership and policy harmonization. And there are a range of initiatives that already exist in that regard. How do we bring them together? How do we push them to the forefront? And how do we mobilize the political will as well as the role of civil society to be able to pull this together to deliver for our people? In connection with that is the importance of country coordination for democracy. And Honorable Oken mentioned it, that there was a time when the NEPAD was formed. It became an anchor point for conversations about development, democracy, and accountability between nations. Even our foreign partners took a keen interest in it because they saw it as a serious enterprise, especially with things like the Africa peer review mechanism. These things began to make us not just talk to one another, but to become brothers and sisters who were holding one another accountable and ensuring that we were all doing right, not just by our governments, but for our people. And in that regard, RPD also wants to help to facilitate the process of enhanced coordination to enhance democracy for the force for development. It has also been said, nobody has a monopoly of knowledge, not the West, not the South, not the North. In fact, in today's knowledge economy, we all have to ensure that we're learning, not just from outside, but also from within. So in that regard, we've noticed that, of course, there's limited peer learning. There are many African countries that are doing exceedingly well in different sectors. Why are we not learning from one another? Why are we not sharing case studies? Why are we not sharing the models and the approaches that we've used? But we go abroad to go and learn from others whose realities are very different from ourselves. So in this regard, RPD seeks to facilitate enhanced peer learning and, of course, also providing technical support to one another. Under His Excellency, the Honorable Minister, Foreign Affairs, there's also the Technical Aid Corps from Nigeria, which actually deploys Nigerian experts to other parts of the African region and even other countries in the global south to do exactly just that, to ensure that what we know is helping all the people that are friends and our allies in the process of strengthening their governance systems as well as sectoral development and technical support. And the fifth one has already been mentioned. So here we have a bold vision, ladies and gentlemen, and your excellency. A multi-country initiative rooted in shared values, aspirations, and regional cooperation. A platform to coordinate, to learn, and to lead democratic innovation. And a West African democratic model that delivers the dividends of democracy for the people and that unites the region. And the vision statement for RPD very clearly and very aptly and very articulately states to advance democratic governance in West Africa by promoting ownership, inclusion, integrity, and effective institutions that serve the people. Ladies and gentlemen, that is why we are here. And before I hand over to my able colleague, Professor Camille, I have had the honor and privilege of serving in 5 political appointments across 3 administrations, both in the legislative and the executive arm of government, and I've had the privilege of working with many ministers of foreign affairs. But I don't think we've had one minister of foreign affairs who is an astute student of international relations, who is a thinker, a scholar, who is a technocrat in his own right, and also who envisions a program and rolls up his sleeves and helps to drive and to build it. Your Excellency, congratulations. You started, and we'll make sure that what you have started shall be completed. And of course, we thank our friends at the United Nations Development Program for bringing the Honorable Minister's idea into reality. Thank you very much, and I hand over to you, dear Keith.
Your Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Maitama Tuga, Your Excellency, Honorable Oluwole Oke, Your Excellency, Honorable Fuad Laguda, Your Excellency, Madam Resident Representative of United Nations Development Program Nigeria, and the Resident Coordinator of AI, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners here present and here if they represented as well, distinguished colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and from the United Nations systems, ladies and gentlemen. The vision is clearly laid out, why the RPD is clearly laid out. My job is to take this discussion forward by looking at how are we going to proceed. And these chart on the board clearly gives us the levels that are critical to the task of taking the RPD forward. You do require a very solid management arrangement that really responds to the minister's about desire to have an RPD that truly reflects the wishes of the participating states. To have an RPD that is far from capture of any front, ideology, geography, or any persuasion, and that brings the best in terms of technical as well as judiciary management mechanisms to its operation. So at a very, very top level, and this is where the shots are called, we do have regional oversight board to provide high-level strategic leadership from participating countries. So this is where the countries are, and they call the shots. They approve the budget. They determine the plans. They determine the yearly work plans. They approve. What they say is what is done, and what they don't say does not get done until their okay is provided. That is the policy organ for this, and that's where, if there is a master for the RPD, that's where the master sits. Next to that is the RPD, Program Coordinating Team. This is where the program governance rests, and that is the responsibility of the United Nations Development Program. They bring their skills, their expertise, their networks to bear on the job. And they bring the attributes of not just the experience, but also independence to bear on the management. That coordinating team is a UNDP team, and it serves as the hub to manage the entire process. Then we have RPD, Program Secretariat. That is, it's like the national coordinating point that sits directly in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Delivery Unit. And they respond to all questions of where we need political animation, where we need organization, where we benefit from the benefit of the structures that exist to connect the countries together and to ensure that all the tenets of relations among the countries are not in any way violated, either in action or in thought by the RPD leadership. Technical working group. This is expert team providing technical expertise and technical input in programs of this nature. You rely on the expertise from across the entire region to bear on specific topics, specific development, specific issues that are important to the decisions of the regional oversight board. And as the program evolves, we emphasize that there might be, and that's also subject to ROB, Regional Oversight Board, instances where we will have on-the-ground programs, not in every country, in specific countries, over specific time, that will require a little bit of local implementation capacity that is closer to the work, and that is the function of the country level implementation team. You might see in some countries, you might not see in others. You might see in some countries at some point, you might not see it again, depending on the nature of the work at hand. Further, this is subject to the decisions of the Regional Oversight Board as well. The RPD would tackle specific thematic priorities. These are examples. There will be many more, depending on the decisions and the wishes of the Oversight Board. For example, national ownership, put that at the corner. That is that runs through virtually everything that is done. It is owned by the ROB and the countries involved. But there are thematic considerations, like rule of law, for example. That is critical. We are talking about democracy delivering dividends, and it cannot happen if there is no respect for justice and rule of law. And as Mr. Iwale said in his presentation, we are not teaching anybody anything. We are not bringing anything new, but the experiences and knowledge that exist, we use them in a new way that will benefit that will advance the avowed commitment of our government to deliver the best possible level of dividends to the people. Cross-border exchange, that is critical. If you are connecting democracy to development, then you have to look at your resources. You have to look at the opportunities you have. And we have in abundance. And this is historical as well. Cross-border relationships that are social and economic in nature, and to see how we can use it to leverage and advance growth and development in the region. Political participation and inclusion, that's important. Participation, representation, these are all key to getting that inclusivity that democracy requires in order to make everybody feel a part, but also to reach everybody in terms of dividend. there will be others, including electoral assistance, for example, including constitutional processes, for example, but also accountability and learning. Now, how do we ensure that when we do all of this, we still have those elements that keep us on our toes and keep us from derailing or impacting negatively in terms of the values that are held by our people across the country? First, this particular RPD will work on the basis of the best in terms of standards and in terms of processes. The guiding principles include, number one, respect for sovereignty and independence. Independence in thought, independence in action. And these are very, very important. That if you do not operate on the basis of independence, then it means you are subjecting RPD to the whims and caprices of sections, not necessarily of the whole. So independence is extremely important, and people who are familiar with the United Nations and the UNDP, if you cannot get respect for, if you cannot get independent, it becomes very difficult to deliver on the promises of the partnerships that we manage. Sovereignty is important. There's no way. People who are sitting here, they know that much more than I do. That everything is governed by the sovereignty, and individual sovereignties are guarded and they are respected. It will be so with this particular project. Rule of law and social contract. I spoke about rule of law before. Social contract is also important because every country has its own guiding law. It respects its own order, whether you call it a constitution or you call it principles of the state. These will be respected, and it's a cardinal point in international relations that countries work together, they partner, but they do not do anything outside their own social contract with the people. Inclusivity, Mr. Iwole spoke about this. Everybody will be carried along in theory, but also in practice. Non-partisanship. Non-partisanship is extremely important because you do not operate in a situation in which a perception of independence is not very clear. If there's a perception of KK working for A, not all the 36 letters in the alphabet, then it becomes a problem. You can easily lose credibility if you do not abide fully by the principles of partnership. Accountability and transparency. This is extremely important. It's important for United Nations. It's important for UNDP because it's cardinal to the way we work, bringing the best in terms of judiciary management and financial management principles to bear on what is RPD's resources, but also RPD's about the objective. So accountability, transparency will be a cardinal principle, and everything will be context sensitive. We do appreciate the values that bind us together. We do appreciate the values of the constituents of the RPD program, and it's important for projects like this, a big program like the RPD, to fully respect and be sensitive to social, but also political and economic values in individual, but also in the whole. Finally, what results are we going to get at the end of the day? And this is where I'm connecting the how and the what together. And first, like Mr. Iwole said before, it offers a shared African vision for democracy. Why is it different from other visions of democracy? This is authentic, and this is really homemade. Is the way that the ROB devices that we work. But more importantly, it takes our values into consideration. And that you don't get by import. No, you get by original ideas, which is authentic. Two, it will reclaim ownership of Africa's democratic evolution based on our values. We're not unmindful of the fact that this is a working process. We're not unmindful of the fact that each country that is represented in the RPD program has a democratic journey that it is on, has some democratic aspiration, and that if we come via the RPD, then we're able to reclaim that process in a way that domesticates it and makes it truly own and truly reflective of our own aspirations as well. Three, it will reinforce, it will enhance and reinforce institutional resilience, because the way the RPD is going to work, when you look at the thematic breadth of possibilities, is that it will not only work on the basis of skills that will be enhanced, systems that will be strengthened, structures that will be reinforced, but also synergies among them. Synergies across countries, synergies across teams, synergies across different aspects of the program. And if you have that, what we get is resilience. We're able to not only serve across all the areas of need, we are also able to serve in a way that responds to shocks better. It's shock ready and it's shock proof. And finally, it will promote shared reforms, PLN, and mutual accountability. Accountability on the part of members to the extent that they are fully committed to the processes, but also accountability on the part of the implementers, also the program managers, particularly for UNDP as well, but also for all that are connected at any point of the value chain in delivering the RPD. Once again, I want to end by thanking the Honorable Minister for his political leadership. I want to thank the resident representative of the UNDP for also our own leadership in terms of guiding us to get this program to a point that today touches on everything that any country that is involved in it will want as questions to be answered. Thank you both, and thank you, distinguished audience. And now yield back to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much, Professor Kamaldeen. And we know the day is fast spent, so we'll race through this very, very quickly. Very, very aptly said. Thank you very much. He has helped us to understand the rudiments and the mechanisms through which this will be working. But the question that will be in the back of some people's minds is, why is this unique? Why is it different? Well, first of all, something that the Honorable Minister continues to say, and I think this is very important to share with our august audience, is that even though Nigeria is spearheading and kickstarting this process, this is a collective project. It is not a Nigeria-only project. It is a project that is a West African project, and all that Nigeria is doing is helping. I'm not sure, I'm sure you all have very nice cars, but some of us in the younger days, before your car can start, you have to push it. And you need some people to stand behind and push it, and then you change the gear, and then the car jumps forward. Well, that is what Nigeria is doing in this instance. It's pushing it so that we can all take this vehicle or the RPD forward in a collective manner. And also, very, very importantly, it also builds on norms that we have already agreed to as African states. The AU Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, the ECOWAS Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance. These are things that we've already committed ourselves to. So it really seeks to not replace, but to complement all these other processes and be a bridge on existing towards implementing existing structures. And again, another question is, why Nigeria? Well, one thing that we all know and we all attest to is that no country is perfect. Neither is Nigeria. But I think one thing we will all agree that when it comes to peace, stability, and democracy in Africa, Nigeria, over decades, has always been consistent in its commitment to the well-being of all African nations, no matter how far away. And it is in that regard that not only as the largest democracy in Africa, but also it helps us lend strong leadership, helping to set the tone for some of our democratic conversations across the region, but also in terms of the regional influence that it plays in terms of the African Union and other regional platforms. And like I said earlier on, our track record for advocating for stability, peace, and good governance in Africa. But quite fundamental to this enterprise, because the emphasis here is on partnership, it's driving collaboration, building strategic alliances for democratic resilience, particularly under the Honorable Minister through the 4D diplomacy foreign policy strategy of our country, and which you all know that democracy is actually one of the first in that 4D. So today, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the reason for being here is actually a call for partnership. We invite member states, our brothers and our sisters across the region to volunteer as champions, to join us in this worthy enterprise, in piloting and this flagship RPD initiatives, and helping to set new standards for democratic innovation and excellence across our region. We also call on you to please help to embed RPD into your national development plans and even into your diplomatic conversations, and also to infuse it into some of the diplomatic dialogues that you're having with other partners across the region and internationally, because this is what will ensure that it survives electoral cycles and flourishes through interministerial coordination and civil society collaboration. Finally, this, if anything, is about not just commitment, but also about continuity. Like the Honorable Minister said, it's not a one-time event, but a sustained journey which requires political will, and I think you've already seen that demonstrated through the role the Honorable Minister is playing, and of course His Excellency, the President, and all the work he's been doing through the West African sub-region and even with the African Union. Technical cooperation, this has already been demonstrated by our partnership with UNDP, and our expectation is that other development partners, some whom we will also meet in the course of this week, will come on board. Interministerial alignment, ensuring that the ministers who drive issues and processes related to all the above across different sectors are able to work in synergy, and of course cross-sectoral collaboration, because this is not just about government alone. It's about government, it's about civil society, it is about the private sector, and it's also about the youth and an inclusive approach, even also ensuring that people living with disabilities are also part of this conversation as well. I think we will round up with the illustrious words of the former UN Secretary General, someone who we all respect. And he said, let us move together, knowing that the health of democracy is measured by the extent to which all voices are heard and respected. The regional partnership for democracy seeks to ensure that all voices are heard and respected. We thank you very much indeed.
Your Excellencies, may I ask for another round of applause for our facilitators and all the speakers from the Honorable Minister, to our host, and to the members of the legislative arm. Up to this point today, we have situated the context of RPD, and I'm sure it has been clearly defined. We are now at the point where we have an interactive session for your questions, the things that might be bothering you in your mind, and whatever else you need some enlightenment on. First and foremost, may I point you to the jackets in front of you? There are some documents there that also enlighten us on what RPD really is. We have some certain questions, but beyond that, The floor will now be thrown open to the members of the diplomatic community that are here present, and all those who have questions that they might need enlightenment on. I'm sure we have more than enough resources on this table to answer those questions. Thank you very much. You may please signify and then we'll bring the mic to you. Oh.
We could use the.
I don't know if the translation is working well, so that I can express myself better in French.
Yes, it's working.
It's working?
Yes,
So, ok. Je voudrais remercier Monsieur le ministre des Affaires étrangères du Nigeria et de le féliciter pour cette très grande initiative, mettant en place ce programme RPD avec UNPD. Et je voudrais également remercier les présentateurs pour cette brillante présentation. Mon premier commentaire, c'est vraiment de remercier le ministre des Affaires étrangères et derrière nous, le gouvernement du Nigeria. Parce que nous, pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, nous souhaitons, nous appelons de tous les vœux ce leadership du Nigeria. Le Nigeria est notre grand pays et nous attendons ce leadership du Nigeria dans tous les domaines, que ce soit sur le plan politique, sur le plan économique et sur le plan social. Et donc, cette initiative va dans ce sens. C'est pourquoi nous voudrions donc la saluer. J'ai compris également que ce programme va se développer pour renforcer la démocratie dans la région, dans le cadre d'un partenariat avec des activités comprenant les recherches, le renforcement de capacités, les formations, etc. Je voudrais faire juste quelques commentaires sur les présentations qui ont été faites. La question qui a été soulevée d'intégrer la philosophie africaine dans la démocratie. Peut-être que les présentateurs peuvent approfondir un peu plus ce qu'ils entendent par là. C'est une piste de réflexion qui se développe de plus en plus et est important qu'on en parle, qu'on en sache davantage, parce que lorsque vous prenez les fondements de la démocratie tels que définis, n'est-ce pas, par l'Occident, c'est un homme, une voix. Et lorsque vous prenez le paysan dans le fin fond du pays, vous lui demandez de voter pour le président de la République, d'autres il ne sait rien, il ne comprend rien au programme présenté, sur quelle base il vote. Il vote sur des documents affectifs parce qu'il est de sa région, de sa religion, ou parce que quelqu'un lui a dit de le voter. Donc, ça pose quelquefois de problèmes
entre la base et l'objectif fondamental. Et donc, il y a là une question réelle pour approfondir, n'est-ce pas, la question de la pratique ou de la philosophie de la compréhension diplomatique dans nos pays. Et on ne peut pas, n'est-ce pas, laisser sous silence tous les modes de démocratie consensuelle qui ont été développés dans nos régions, dans nos traditions, dans nos outils. Comment on peut mieux les intégrer dans la démocratie moderne? Vous avez parlé également du dividende. La démocratie est un système politique qui est censé apporter un mieux-être. Et depuis 1990, le vent de la démocratie a soufflé sur l'Afrique de l'Ouest. On a eu, je sais pas, beaucoup d'élections, beaucoup d'alternances qui ont donné de nouveaux présidents. Est-ce que le dividende est là? Ça pose tout simplement la question du bilan. Depuis que nous avons engagé la démarche, où en sommes-nous? Qu'est-ce qui a marché? Qu'est-ce qui n'a pas marché? Comment on peut apprendre de nos erreurs? Ce bilan est extrêmement important. Si on ne le fait pas, on va continuer de dire la démocratie c'est bon, sans améliorer nos pratiques. Vous avez parlé de l'urgence de mettre en place le RPD, je suis d'accord avec vous. Mais vous n'avez pas mentionné toutes les violences que la démocratie a générées depuis toutes les violences liées aux élections dans les différents pays, que ce soit ici au Nigeria ou dans d'autres pays, qui aussi nous donnent cette urgence de trouver des solutions pour une pratique démocratique plus importante. Tout ça pour dire que c'est une bonne initiative que nous devons soutenir. Et c'est quelque chose, et vraiment, il y a de la matière pour approfondir la réflexion. J'ai vu qu'il y a un volet recherche qui va certainement adresser ces questions fondamentales que j'ai essayé de procéder ici. Je voudrais vous remercier encore une fois. Merci.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I think we'll take one more, and then the facilitators will respond to the first set of questions.
Je ne m'étais pas présenté ambassadeur de Côte d'Ivoire. Merci.
Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado. Eu gostaria de. Ok. Eu gostaria de aproveitar a onda do meu colega, o embaixador Garrido, para falar em português. Portanto, é isso. Mas queria, antes de mais, de cumprimentar o Sr. Ministro dos Negócios Estrangeiros, Yusuf Maitama e dizer-lhe de viva voz que fico sempre feliz quando participo.
Só que não? Ok. Better não. Sim, estava a dizer que. I will go there. I will. Ok, bom, então vou começar pelo nome. Sou Vladimir Monteiro Silva, o embaixador de Cabo Verde na Nigéria e representante permanente junto à CEDEAO. Mas isso vinha depois, não tem problema.
Não, eu queria dizer que gostaria de cumprimentar o Sr. Ministro dos Negócios Estrangeiros, portanto, da Nigéria, o professor Yusuf Maitama Tugar, e dizer que é sempre uma honra para mim participar em eventos em que ele participa. Portanto, fico sempre feliz quando vejo que em eventos como este, tanto participa o Sr. Ministro, eu agradeço. Queria também cumprimentar a senhora representante, presidente das Nações Unidas, portanto, da PNUD, e agradecer também por esta atividade, por nos ter convidado a ser parte desta atividade que nós consideramos extremamente importante e de atualidade. De atualidade porque nós sabemos, nós assistimos agora que as políticas, muitas vezes protecionistas e individualistas, ultimamente têm surpreendido tanto a opinião pública internacional, têm, de alguma forma, perigado, portanto, a democracia ao redor do mundo, não só em África, mas em todo o mundo. Põe em perigo, conforme eu disse, não só a democracia, mas também os ganhos alcançados, tanto ao longo do tempo, nos processos de desenvolvimento desses países. Há países frágeis e vulneráveis que têm feito de tudo para promover o desenvolvimento, tanto e o bem-estar das suas populações, que neste momento, tanto com a incerteza que paira sobre o mundo, sentem cada vez mais ameaçados. Mais ameaçados porque têm um compromisso com as suas populações. Compromisso de promover o desenvolvimento, de promover o bem-estar e de promover a tranquilidade. Por isso é que, portanto, têm de buscar alguma forma, por exemplo, de financiar os seus desenvolvimentos. E nós sabemos que isto, portanto, buscar de qualquer via, qualquer forma, portanto, a promoção do desenvolvimento, abre portas, muitas vezes, para populismo, para autoritarismo, para formas de governo, muitas vezes estranhas, portanto, ao nosso convívio. Portanto, o mundo está cada vez mais em risco e a África está particularmente em risco. Por isso é que as iniciativas do género deve ser aplaudida e, portanto, promovida. Entretanto, eu vou pegar em duas questões apenas para aqui terminar os meus comentários. Portanto, a referência que portanto, o nosso amigo aqui fez relativamente à independência de pensamento e independência de ação. Portanto, eu pergunto como é que vamos promover a independência de pensamento e independência de ação quando estamos umbilicalmente ligados tanto aos nossos financiadores, que são muitas vezes países desenvolvidos. Como é que vamos fazer isso? Claro está, devemos tanto buscar, refletir e buscar formas tanto, de ter essa independência, mas é algo que nos parece um tanto quanto longe ainda. Tanto a independência de pensamento e a independência de ação. Outra questão que referiu também é a de prestação de contas. Portanto, promover a transparência e promover a prestação de contas. Eu acrescentaria aqui uma palavra que eu adoro muito, que é a traçabilidade. Portanto, a traçabilidade. Portanto, não só promover a transparência e prestar contas, mas também estar prontos para, portanto, provar a traçabilidade dos fundos, dos meios postos, portanto, à nossa disposição. Também gostei muito do Sr. Ministro quando disse que temos que buscar soluções africanas para desafios africanos. Eu sou um apologista disso e há muito. Penso que devemos sim, devemos sim buscar soluções africanas para problemas africanos. Eu sou de um pequeno país insular com vários problemas, mas pensamos que essa comunhão de esforços para buscar problemas, tanto africanos, para buscar soluções africanas para problemas africanos, é algo que devemos ter tanto no nosso dia a dia, porque não é normal, por exemplo, falo do meu país, que nós tenhamos 98% de intercâmbio, trocas comerciais com países fora do Portugal. Não é normal. Portanto, temos que refletir sobre isso, temos que buscar alternativas, soluções para que, de facto, encontremos na Nigéria, no Ghana, no Senegal e noutros países, portanto, respostas a muitos problemas que enfrentamos e que esperamos que sejam resolvidos ou que sejam encontradas soluções em outras paragens. Muito obrigado, portanto, por esse tempo. I thank you very much. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, for the very, very deep and thoughtful questions that have been put to the table. May I now give the floor, I think, to His Excellency the Honorable Minister to respond to some of these questions before he comes to the facilitator.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, for the contributions that are very enriching. And really, this is the purpose of this exercise, because the RPD is something that we all need to take ownership for. And in order to do that, we have to understand what it's all about and interrogate all presentations. My brother, the Ambassador of Cote d'Ivoire, touched on several issues, and I would just focus on those that I feel require answers, because some he also some were contributions. So in terms of shedding more light on the philosophy of the RPD and how it relates to democracy, and also how to improve the status of democracy, because he also commented on democracy having brought about a lot of violence, which is very true. But democracy, of course, is it's not static, and as I often say, is democracy is a process and it's not an event. It's always evolving. So during that evolution, you of course have periods of setbacks, such as violence. Sometimes it moves forward and then it moves backwards. If you look at, for instance, the concept of democracy as approached at some point by some think tanks in the developed world, where they felt that that democracies don't fight each other because they share the same norms, the same values. It turned out not to be the case, because others referred to the correlates of war studies, which has been tracking. It's a quantitative study of wars. Anything that is over, I think, 500, 1,000 battle deaths is recorded. It's been going on for decades. And it showed that, no, that is not the case. In certain instances, democracies fight each other because the democracies are at different stages of, I don't want to say development, evolution, if you will. So it doesn't mean we should not keep on working at it. But what makes the RPD and this exercise most germane is the fact that there has been an increase in the challenges that democracies are facing, or the concept of democracy, when countries try to apply it, especially in this environment, in the world as it stands today. One such challenge is the fact that we're increasingly deemed to be living in a post-factual society, where truth itself is becoming increasingly difficult to determine what is truth. We have AI, we have generative adversarial networks, misinformation, disinformation. And if we as democracies just assume that it will take care of itself, because there's this thinking that it's self-corrective, then perhaps we could end up having the shock of our lives. It is not self-correcting. We need to intervene, and one way of intervening is, of course, these sort of programs to help strengthen the institutions that democracy works upon, and also to give a better understanding that political rivals in a democracy, that is, parties that contest against each other, those contestations, should not necessarily insist on strict rules and rule following. If you do that, then you choke up the space. There has to be, we should not abandon unspoken norms of and tacit agreement and discourse and compromise, which for us Africans is something that comes naturally anyway. Informal means of reaching compromise. For a country like Nigeria, this is how we've come about. We're a very diverse country, and we have, over the years, been able to, I wouldn't say master, but at least surmount a lot of challenges through the art of compromise. And you can only reach that compromise if you engage in the hard work of dialogue, of negotiations, a lot of it that is informal. So I think this is the African approach that would also help us handle democracy, be able to handle the challenges in this, in the world that, this so-called post-factual world that we live in today. My brother from Cabo Verde also talked about, he asked questions about how we can leverage on each other to, how do we cut the umbilical cord to become more independent, because a lot has to do with our deficiencies in development, in financing, in funding. And then he talked about being a bit more accommodating to non-democratic models within Africa. So in terms of how we tackle some of the challenges to do with development and funding, and of course we see trade wars now in the offing, which makes it even all the more challenging, is to look inwards. And that's why we're talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area. And that is why, in spite of all our challenges, we need to let our citizenry know and appreciate the gains of regional economic communities such as ECOWAS, because we have done so much. And in situations such as this is where they become even all the more important, because we can leverage on regional economic communities to bridge the gap, funding gap. If development aid is being cut by certain countries, assistance and so forth, we can utilize those regional economic communities such as ECOWAS, and of course the continental ones as well, and the partnership with the United Nations. And we also have to strengthen the United Nations and as you know, complementarity, subsidiarity. We can only do that if we allow ourselves to function within those groupings. If we are going to operate individually, as individual states, then we don't get to leverage on the numbers. And again, if you look at what we're planning ahead, for instance, for ECOWAS, which you know, the African Atlantic gas pipeline to link all the ECOWAS member states along the coast, and as I've heard you object and emphasize, including Cabo Verde, of course. And you have increasingly, we're making discoveries. Ghana, when the West Africa gas pipeline was constructed, was not a gas producing nation. Today, it's a gas producing nation. It's producing into the West African gas pipeline. So also we have discoveries in Senegal. So these countries along the coast, of course, will continue to produce into that, and the wealth that is going to be generated out of such endeavors is what we're going to use to bridge the gap. And trade also, the linkages, Abidjan-Lagos corridor, we're now talking about Abidjan-Dakar corridor, we have SIGMAT, we have so many regional institutions and organizations that are allowing us to leverage off of scale, to scale up. Because if you have a playbook that allows a small country to become a world-class country in terms of economic performance, it is never going to be able to achieve the scale that it would if it was part of a larger organization. And it doesn't matter how big a country is. Even Nigeria benefits more when it's working with other countries as opposed to on a standalone basis. And especially since all of us are facing the challenge of this huge demographic bulge or dividend. How are we going to contain the population? Even in a country like Nigeria, if we're going to be 400 million in the year 2050, how are we going to accommodate 400 million people if we don't work with the rest of the region? And the same thing for the other countries. We're all across the region, we're going to face this population boom. So the only way we can do that is to work together to ensure our region is safe, is secure, and that we have those linkages, infrastructure linkages, trade linkages that we can benefit. And the best template to be able to achieve that is to apply democratic systems that we are comfortable with, that we can work with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Okay, so we move on to the next questions.
Permettez-moi de me joindre à mes collègues qui ont parlé avant moi et qui ont remercié Monsieur le ministre fédéral des Affaires étrangères pour cette initiative très louable. Et je me permets aussi de remercier les présentateurs qui ont aisément présenté leur sujet. Pour ma part, je suis l'ambassadeur du Bénin au Nigeria. Je crois que chaque fois que nous entendons parler de démocratie, surtout nous, Africains, nous nous demandons, est-ce que nous y arrivons ou nous nous en éloignons? Il y a quelques années, tous les pays essayaient d'aller dans cette voie-là et d'atteindre la démocratie. Et subitement, nous nous rendons compte que nous nous en éloignons. En tout cas, pour bon nombre de pays. Pour moi, la démocratie, c'est quoi? C'est un système par lequel le pouvoir est exercé par le peuple. Parce qu'on a la séparation des pouvoirs. C'est un système par lequel on a les pouvoirs exécutifs, législatifs, judiciaires. Et on essaye autant que faire se peut d'amener, d'avoir moins de corruption, d'avoir des élections libres et transparentes et de se retrouver dans un état de droit. Mais voilà que en Afrique en général, et plus spécialement en Afrique de l'Ouest, nous nous rendons compte que nous nous éloignons de ce système-là. Avant d'atteindre tout ce que Monsieur le ministre et les présentateurs viennent de nous dire, est-ce qu'il ne serait pas bon qu'on s'interpelle donc sur le niveau donc, de ces points que je viens d'énumérer, où vraiment les pouvoirs sont séparés, où nous nous battrons pour réduire complètement la corruption et donner vraiment le pouvoir au peuple. Et ça me fait penser à la question à la problématique de l'ambassadeur de Côte d'Ivoire, qui est que la démocratie telle que nous la vivons maintenant, est-ce que ça aide nos populations? Est-ce que ça nous aide à avancer? Ou est-ce que ça nous fait reculer? Alors, c'est une question que je suis en train de me poser. Comment faire vraiment pour que nous puissions parler de démocratie et être collés à la réalité de l'Afrique? J'ai entendu, j'ai suivi une émission la dernière fois où un étranger, quelqu'un qui n'est pas africain, disait, pour lui, la démocratie en Afrique, c'est le respect de l'hiérarchie. Si vous allez en Afrique, vous allez dans un village, vous allez voir les personnes d'un certain âge qui sont là, assis. Ils peuvent être vieux, n'importe comment, avoir une barbe toute blanche. Elles sont chez eux et sont respectés par tous les enfants qui sont là. Et quand on l'appelle vieux, il est content. C'est un signe de respect. Mais là-bas, chez eux, quand on dit vieux à quelqu'un, la personne est plutôt énervée parce que c'est un signe d'irrespect. Ça me fait penser donc que l'Afrique a ses valeurs. Et nous devons coûte que coûte nous attacher à nos valeurs, ne pas nous en défaire pour quoi que ce soit. Mais en même temps, ces valeurs de la démocratie qui sont séparation de pouvoir, essayer autant que faire se peut de, j'allais dire, pas supprimer, mais réduire complètement la corruption et tout, ça pourrait nous amener vraiment à avancer et à atteindre vraiment la démocratie à l'africaine. C'est ce que je voulais dire. Merci, monsieur le ministre. Merci, madame la représentante de l'UNPD. Je n'ai pas pensé à vous faire un petit coucou, mais je le pense très sincèrement. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think the chairman of the House Committee has also signified interest.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm listening carefully to various submissions from the diplomatic community, of course, from our Honorable Minister, and of course, our two guest presenters. We as lawmakers, we're trained to listen, and thereafter look at issues from the point of law. And my observation and opinion is that this program aligns with our constitution, our foreign policy, adequately captured in our constitution. And from the presentation of our two guest lecturers, I also discovered that it also aligns with the provisions of African Union and of course that of the ECOWAS Union. I just want to observe that the promoters of this idea have really done a thorough thinking, they put on their thinking cap to have come with this position. But I'm just looking at how it's going to be sustained. How we're going to sustain it. Is it a program that has a time frame, or is this something we want to continue to promote? And if it is so, how do we intend to go about it? Do we adopt the role of the thumb, or we put in place legislative framework, so that we can, from the parliament angle, we can begin, because I don't know whether it is the funding of this exercise, whether it's coming squarely from our mother in the house, UNDP, or it's being funded by Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we need to look at this so that going further, the parliament will be able to do the needful. Either come up with a bill to flesh the program up and then put in place a framework to drive it. Which other countries, sister nations who are also partaking can also domesticate, nationally. And then we look at funding it in the various appropriation acts. This is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. Okay, I don't see any.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Honorable Minister. Thank you for your leadership once again. Thank you to the Excellencies, the ambassadors who are here. Perhaps just a few reflections as a contribution to the conversation. The Excellency from Cote d'Ivoire raised a number of points. Sorry, I have to go back a bit to that. And I think some of the issues that he raised would be part of the co-creation that we must have together. In other words, how do we mainstream this squarely into our national planning and policy and legal instruments and processes? The issues around the trade-offs, because of democracy, we have violence. But even if you look at, for example, on the funding side, a lot of money exits our countries whenever we have elections, and it's a double burden for how do we look at some of these things. So I think the program that the Honorable Minister is helping us to think about, there are areas that we need to continue engaging with yourselves to flesh some of those elements. As he said, it is a co-creation, and we must collectively refine the thinking around this as we move forward. On the issue around the financing, I think there are two dimensions to the financing. One that the committee chair on foreign affairs talked about in terms of, do we have the resources? Where is it coming from? And I think financing that comes more largely around with the shifts that is happening in the development space, how do we finance a program like this, but how do we finance the development of our countries in West Africa, which I think is what His Excellency from Cape Verde was referring to. And so a couple of points, maybe from the points that the excellence from Cape Verde raised. I think on the financing side, there's a deeper reflection. Maybe that's also a direct connection with democracy and the democracy program and partnership that we are talking about. Let me just talk about three areas very squarely, and it's also part of the governance of things in Africa. One is our domestic owned resources. We do have resources that sit with us, whether it's our pension funds, and we have some of the rich pension funds in the continent, but we are still not leveraging that. And I think these are areas that we have to think about. How do we do that? Our diaspora, for example, I know Honorable Minister, part of the 4Ds of the Foreign Ministry is also around diaspora funding. And I think these are areas that we need to reflect very deeply within the context of this program, but even beyond, to see how do we leverage that. The second one is, and it links very much to how do we create wealth and how do we finance development when it comes to even our mineral resources. You look at West Africa, we're sitting on a lot, including Nigeria, whether it's our lithium and others. But sometimes we're exporting some of these things in raw state and we're not creating value for that. And I think the financing question, we need to stretch it also. How do we govern our own natural resources in countries where we are, and how do we ensure that the benefit stays with that? And that's part of finance, and that's part of investment, and that's an area that I wanted to just touch on very briefly. Finally, is the point, and I think His Excellency, the Honorable Minister, and ourselves were talking about it very early in the morning before we all convened here, around how we are perceived. And the credit rating agencies, rate African countries poorly, and because of that, we borrow expensively from the market. That perception is based on perceived risk, sometimes of leanings around even our democracy, conflict, and so on and so forth. And so again, I think part of this program, I think, Honorable Minister, we also have to link it to financing, because the more our perception is improved through our democratic values and principles, what we are exhibiting, the more we also perhaps able to also borrow from the market in one that is really truly reflects the right perception. Finally, in terms of the funding, I think, as you know, UNDP is not a donor. We are not a donor. We are a partner to this, and I think we certainly look forward to the support from the National Assembly in terms of investment into this. I mean, Nigeria is showing great leadership, and we must look at resources within as a catalyst, and also see how then we leverage from the other countries that will be part of this initiative. So by all means, we are happy to explore opportunities for financing with you. And as my brother Dako said, the world is in a flux, and the Honorable said everybody's looking within. And so I think it's time for us to look within to see how we can utilize our own resources, or the country's own resources, to be able to finance that. But I thought I'll just add a few words, and thank you, Honorable Minister, for your time.
Thank you very much. If I can just add quickly, well, in terms of how this is being funded, and whether it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that is funding it, or UNDP, I think the chairman is in a better position to answer that, because he knows the status, the financial status of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So, and it's a good thing that you ask these questions, because consider this a pilot, and for it to become sustainable, I'm not going to be Minister of Foreign Affairs for life. I'm just here in terms of the general temporal outlook for a short time. So for it to be sustainable, if it proves to be a laudable project that others buy into, then certainly we will not simply be depending on funding from UNDP. We would require to show that we're partners, counterpart funding. So please, Chairman, I ask you and your colleagues and the National Assembly to look into this and decide on how best we should approach this, be it by way of a bill, whichever form. I'm sure you work on it. And this further underscores how democracies should work, because we have legislators here, which brings me to the issues raised by my sister, the ambassador of the Republic of Benin, about the issue of separation of powers, which is very important in a functioning democracy. It should just not be the executive arm, it should be the legislative arm, it should be, of course, an independent judiciary. But suffice it to say that, as I said in the speech, there's no one size fits all. So we're not looking to say this is the template and has to be applied to every country. So even in terms of separation of powers, each country, of course, has its own idiosyncrasies and its own normals on the ground. And again, with the issue of, you gave the example with the village setting, for instance, it was reminding me of Mahmoud Mamdani when he talks about the bifurcated state. This is another challenge that we have, especially in our region here. The bifurcation between urban life and rural life, and the application of democracy itself in the rural setting, which really is the Achilles heel of democracy in our region, because we see these insurgencies, we see unrest, we see banditry, we see the rise of incubation and rise of terrorist groups. Where does it happen? It happens mostly in rural settings, particularly in complex border areas. And part of the challenge is because we are not having routine elections, routine transparent electoral processes in these rural settings. So this is something we also hope that RPD will begin to take up and prefer solutions to, so that once we get going, if we're able to address that in our region, and there are differences between even francophone and anglophone, and I'm sure lusophone when it comes to that. But one thing we have in common is that we have these challenges in these rural areas, and hopefully we'll be able to address them through such efforts. Lastly, in terms of corruption, because we emphasize the issue of corruption also, I think we have to also begin to look at the perception of corruption itself, because sometimes, because we adopted foreign systems, there are certain things that ought not to be corrupt practices that are construed as corrupt practices. So how do our lawmakers re-examine that and make them not to be corrupt? Because in many climes, they're not considered to be corrupt. I've given this example a number of times. I traveled abroad. I'm not going to mention the country. I forgot my passport in a taxi. And back then, there were no mobile phones. I went back to where I was staying. I made a phone call. I was told 45 or so minutes later to come to a police station to pick up my passport. And I was asked to fill two forms. One was a form that I was going to fill for a contribution I was going to make to the taxi driver that returned the passport. In Africa is a bribe. The second was a contribution I was going to make to that particular police station that they collect from such from such activities they pool together. At the end of the month, they share amongst all the officers in that police station. So here, it would be considered to be a bribe because a policeman helps you, you give him something, it's a bribe. So how do we, examine these sort of things? And then also we self-flagellate. We amplify the so-called venal practices that are here because, if you go to other countries and you try to have a discussion with them about the corrupt practices that are happening in their country, they are not interested. So we have to go back to the issue of patriotism, what patriotism means to us, and the moral issues, the ethical issues when it comes to civic responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Our day is fast spent, but I must say that everybody will agree that it has been very informative and we've all learned a lot. As we wind down the program today, I've been asked to inform the House that there will be a family photo just right outside, and that our hosts have graciously also made arrangements for lunch. On that note, may I now invite Her Excellency, the Deputy Resident Representative Program, UNDP Nigeria, Madam Besha Redcap Alepo, to now give us the vote of thanks and closing remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, bon après-midi. Yes, my name is Barsha. I'm the deputy representative here. Thank you, Honorable Minister. It's always an honor to be assigned the great task of closing, and thank you because you get to listen deeply. And what a great morning to hear about such deep issues. Honorable Minister, Excellency of Foreign Affairs, Honorable Senators, senior government officials from the Government of Nigeria, Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, Member States of West Africa. So my UNDP resident representative, Elsie, got to say welcome, and I have the honor of saying thank you. Merci beaucoup. And thank you for spending the morning with us, again, in the UN House, which is your house as member states. So in closing, it's always good when you have deep discussions. What a morning to discuss the region, to discuss our countries, to discuss democracy. By way of closing, maybe I'll remind us of this morning's dialogue and engagement around three things. So, Honorable Minister, I think we shouldn't call it. Let's for the three things that we hope you remember moving forward is the nomenclature rather than saying the RPD. I think it was very intentional, the three words in the name, the Regional Partnership for Democracy. So those are three words. So just in closing, for three things, let's just a brief reminder to unpack that. So what did we hear this morning in this stakeholder dialogue with all of you as member states of West Africa? One is the first word, regional. We focused on context specific, what works for us, homegrown solutions, and the UNDP resident representative, Elsie, reminded us of the minister reminded us of the Regional Partnership for Democracy, that's 3. And our UNDP resident representative reminded us of the 3 pillars of the Regional Program of Democracy. So there's 3 and 3. So if we unpack regional, it links to also one of the pillars of the program, which is learning, homegrown solutions, and knowledge coming from our countries and exchanging amongst ourselves as member states. So that's a bit of the regional piece, that's one. So for partnerships, let's also recall what our UNDP resident representative reminded us of is a key pillar, which is citizen engagement and all the domains that the partnership offers around working with our own citizens that works around homegrown solutions and what works for us in our context in West Africa. And finally, democracy. What a rich dialogue. I won't attempt the task of closing on that, but it also links to one of the 3 pillars, which is about resilience and institutional resilience. So the offer of the program has a lot to do when you unpack, when you take with you the package I invite you to really look at that and how the offer under the leadership of the government of Nigeria is how we can learn from each other to build our institutions to be more resilient. So I'll close around reiterating how His Excellency, our Honorable Minister, opened. There was a call, well, before the 5, I'll remind us, and in closing, about the call to action, around the 5 calls to action that His Excellency opened with. But I just did want to quote 2 things from Honorable Minister that I thought was thought-provoking. To quote the minister, he was offering for the Regional Partnership for Democracy that it's an African approach in a post-factual world. And I could see the faces that really resonated, and it was food for thought for the context that we're living in today, isn't it? So by closing, I will just recall the 5 actions called upon all of us in this member state dialogue this morning. That was a call to action from Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs for the government of Nigeria. 1 was a call for endorsement. 2 was a call to integrate. 3 was a call for alignment. 4 was an invitation for all of you as member states to be anchor countries. And finally, it was the communication piece, a communique that would be led by, I'm sure, the Honorable Minister. So with that closing, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.